Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chakra Way Meditation Podcast. I am joined today by another interesting guest, and I can't wait to get into this. I have with me Michael Spremulli, who is an evidence-based professional astrologer. So, astrology is one of those things that we all know about. We all know when Mercury goes retrograde, or we know our star sign and what we're supposed to be like as a result. And I have to say, I have to confess, I have long been a semi-skeptic.
Sure.
Those kind of newspaper things have never really been what I believe in. However, this big overarching thing I'm so into. And so I'm really interested to know your take and your methods. So welcome, Michael. Thank you so
Well,
much for joining me.
thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So when did you get into astrology? When did this become your thing?
A long time ago. So I remember the situation like it was yesterday. It was 1994.
Mhm.
I was between my undergraduate and graduate programs at university. I'd graduated with my degree in psychology and wasn't quite sure what was going to be next. So I was working at a psychiatric hospital, and someone there kind of sensed my uneasiness as far as what the next chapter was going to be. And they said, I'm going to gift you a reading with my astrologer who I've been seeing for years. And I said, okay. That was a new world to me. I was raised in a faith-based system that didn't smile too kindly on astrology, so I felt a little conflicted,
Mhm.
but I opted to have the reading, and it changed my life. I'm glad I did. I remember walking into the woman's home who was the astrologer, who's still practicing today, by the way. I still get a reading from her a couple of times a year because yes, I can read my own chart, but like anything else, when someone else brings perspective in, it adds a whole new layer of understanding.
Yeah.
So I remember I walked in there. There was, and here's what was interesting. It was just a regular office. There, a home office. There were no piles of incense burning. There was no new age music going. Just this woman, her big fluffy white dog, and she had my chart in her hands because I had given her my birth data. And then she proceeded to describe my life pretty much up till that point, current situations I was struggling with at that moment, and then went ahead to do some forecasting for trends that I could expect over the next 6 months to a year. So I walked out of there like mind blown. I said, this is crazy stuff. And then, of course, I kept up with those predictions or forecasts, and I'd say about 80% of them ended up hitting the nail right on the head. So
Mhm.
that's what lit the flame in me of interest in astrology.
Yeah.
But then I went off to graduate school to get my master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis on personality assessment. And astrology and academia, especially at that time, it was like you don't mix the two. So I kind of started getting books and reading a little bit about astrology, but kept it to myself. I had to get through my graduate degree.
Mm.
And then over time, I started getting more books and reading more. And then in the early 2000s, I procured some professional astrology software, which is what's needed if you're really going to dive into the stuff because it does, a variety of calculations. And then I started asking friends and family or anyone within earshot, hey, I'm studying astrology, not quite sure what I'm doing. Would you like me to run your chart and you can give me some feedback and I'll let you know what I see? And everyone said, yes, definitely.
Yeah, of course.
So I started doing that, and people were saying, hey, this is pretty interesting stuff. And I even took a shot at doing some forecasting, which is, looking at what you can expect over the next months and or years ahead. And then a strange thing started to happen. People were coming back to me like 6 months later saying, hey, that reading you did, is that was cool. And I loved it, but could you do some more of that forecasting stuff for the next 6 months to a year? I'll gladly pay you for it. And it was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure. Why not? If you found it helpful, I like doing this stuff. And before you know it, I had a side hustle develop before the term side hustle was even a thing.
Yes.
And,
Wonderful.
and then from there, it kind of snowballed to, down the path of, I worked and still do in the corporate world doing pre-employment evaluations for for companies before they hire someone to make sure that it's the right fit. And I kind of had this small client base of people I was doing astrology consultations for, never advertised, never did any promotion, because there was always a part of astrology that just didn't quite land with me. And it somewhat goes back to what you touched on at the beginning related to horoscopes in popular press and newspaper and whatnot, because that's not pure astrology. And there's a lot of generalized statements there that have to hit a whole swath of people.
Of course, yeah.
And even in astrology 101, a lot of times you read the books and it's like, well, if you don't see a certain thing here, then you got to look at this other part of the chart. If it's not there, then you got to, before you know it, I found myself running all over the chart trying to make things fit. And that was the one thing that just kind of held me back from diving into this feet first, until I ran into the work of a gentleman by the name of David Cochran. And David Cochran is alive and well today. He's here in the States, and he has been researching astrology since the 1970s. And through data analysis, extreme case sampling, and evidence-based methods, he has come up with a system of astrology called vibrational astrology, which is the type of astrology that I primarily work with. And why it's different is that it has a very strict and stringent set of rules that have science behind them when it comes to doing the interpretations. So we're not trying to fit something in a place where it really doesn't fit. And then once I got into that and started learning all the intricacies of vibrational astrology, then the floodgates open. It's like, this squares with my data side of my brain, because I'm a data guy. I've got an advanced degree in psychology, which is very data heavy, and you're taught statistics and experimental design. And then when I started getting into the vibrational astrology, I realized, hey, these are sound statistical research methods that are being used to validate its claims. And there we are. So that's my whole life, and hopefully under 3 minutes up to that point.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so you were a therapist, a psychologist, and then so they must feed into each other. The first thing that comes to my mind is when you're doing a reading, and you said, like, when you went to see that lady for the very first time, that you walked in, she had your chart, and she just told you everything, and it was really on the nail. It was on the head. Do you think, is there, and I'm hoping for an answer here, because you just said that you're very science-based, evidence-based, data-driven, all of that, but is there intuition within that reading?
That's a great question, because I see a lot of times, and by the way, as far as daily horoscopes and forecasts, we could talk more about those down the road. I do those, but you've got to look at them through the right lens that they were designed to be viewed through. Because I put out dailies all the time. So from an intuitive perspective, you'll see sometimes on social media, a lot of astrologers say, I'm an intuitive astrologer. And I just kind of scratch my head and say, well, what the hell is that? Because, if you're an astrologer, you should be using some sort of astrological system. And there are over 30 of them out there. There's traditional Western, there's Vedic, there's sidereal, there's vibrational. There's a whole bunch of different systems. So to me, when I hear someone say that, that signals to me that maybe they don't know astrology as much and are just kind of going with whatever comes up. And I have nothing against intuitive readings. I a lot of times will go to intuitives, but it's a different thing. So I think my intuition comes into play in the following way. When I'm looking at someone's birth chart, and let's say they give me their information, from the little bit that they might have said, I'm interested in career stuff, or I've been in this job forever, I like it, but I don't like the people, what am I meant to do? The intuition in me directs me to look at, all right, well, I need to check this specific vibration, or where is this planet placed, and kind of go and look for the order of operations of what's going to be most important to that client. But that's kind of where the intuition ends, because in vibrational astrology, there are very strict criteria as far as how you end up interpreting things. And it's not just a matter of closing your eyes and going with the first thing that pops up. So I think intuition is important. in my work as far as guiding me to look for various elements in a chart, because a chart, it's like a layer, it's like an onion. The deeper you peel it, the more layers you get, and sometimes you end up crying, the deeper you get into things. But
Yeah.
that's kind of where the intuition for me starts and stops, because I'm using astrological concepts that have data behind them, but the intuition kind of nudges me to maybe look at different pieces in a particular order.
Okay. Okay. So, um, I mean, I've had my chart done several times, in a couple of times in my life.
Mhm.
And the most recent one I did was one that I did online, and it came back super detailed, like pages and pages of
Yep.
everything and all the symbols that I have no idea what they're about. But it's very much like, right, your first house is ascendant, whatever, and
Mhm.
your moon is in Cancer. I'm a Scorpio sun, and this is all supposed to lead me to these conclusions. So I'm interested because it's all based on the planets, right? So your Neptune, your Pluto, your this, your that, and then the astrology, which is the signs, which are configurations of further away astrological beings, planets, and so on. So if I'm a Scorpio, I can see Scorpio in the sky sometimes, and it's just those configurations of some stars, which are not in this galaxy. They're not in, they're not in our solar system, I should say.
Mhm.
So there's a relationship between our solar system and the rest of the universe, which has various energies. So, say for the sake of argument, we're talking about Mars, right?
Right.
Mars in, I don't know. So, say I've got, I don't even have the vocabulary to try and
That's
explain.
okay. No, you're doing great. Go ahead. I'll guide you.
But so if I've got, if Mars is in my ascendant or whatever, it has that power. So each planet in our solar system has like a personality, and then its relationship to where it was when you were born also has. So this is the thing that I'm always questioning. I have faith in the universe. The universe is my guide.
Sure.
I have, no, there's no coincidences in a way that everything is there for us. But how can it be? Just, I don't know. I don't even know where.
Okay. I think I'm
People are
picking up
getting.
what you're putting down. So let me give you sort of like a 30,000-foot overview of the theory behind vibrational astrology. And I say
Yeah.
theory because it's being refined like consistently.
Yeah.
There's research going on right now. In fact, there's a conference happening in early March where they're going to be presenting some of the most recent findings in vibrational astrology. So, we don't claim to know everything. Beware of anyone who does. But here's what we have known pretty solidly for the past 40 or so years based on Cochrane's research. The emphasis in vibrational astrology really is not on the signs. And the signs, of course, are these constellations like you described: Aries, Taurus, Capricorn, Aquarius. The signs are helpful. The signs give some qualifying information and give a little flavoring for what's going on. But what we focus on, and this goes back to something you mentioned a moment ago, is the main focus are the planets. Because each planet, as you so accurately mentioned, has its own energy behind it, thus the term vibrational astrology. And
Right.
in VA, in some ways, it's a lot simpler to learn than other methods of astrology, because you have to become familiar with what these planetary energies represent specific to each planet, and then you combine those elements of energy together when they're in aspect or in predominant places in a chart. So the idea is that when we emerge from the womb on Earth, we take our first breath. The moment that we emerge into this universe, the planets in the sky are in a particular configuration. That's what makes us unique. Our view of the sky when we are born into the world, and if we were looking up, it's going to be different in the UK versus in the United States versus even within the United States, different states and locations, because you're viewing the sky through a different perspective.
Hmm.
And the idea is that it's at that moment that we get stamped with our cosmic DNA or our natal chart, because a chart is simply a map of the sky. A lot of people are surprised to know that an astrology chart, all it is a map. That's it. It's not a portal to Middle Earth. It's not channeling demons. It's a map of the sky when we were born. So in vibrational astrology, we look at where those planets were configured and what basic circuits we have to work with throughout this lifetime. And we're all unique. And depending on what planets are creating different connections with others, sets us up to have areas that flow very easily for us in some departments of life. Other areas might be a little bit more challenging. And then what keeps us evolving as humans over time is our natal chart or your birth chart. That never changes. That's your personal game board for you to carry with you from now until you depart planet Earth. But what is always changing are the planets in the sky and the positions that they're in right now. I mean, I've got my software I can pull up and tell you exactly where the sun is, the moon, all the way up through Pluto. And what activates portions of our natal chart is when these planets in the sky, which we refer to as transits, activate or hit particular parts of our chart. This is where these cycles are created. Cycles for opportunity, cycles for growth, cycles for maybe having to get rid of a lot of nonsense and cutting away the waste. Many different cycles. What astrology does is it's basically showing us how the energy is optimally designed to flow through you. That's vibrational astrology in a sentence, if I had to summarize it. It shows you, based on your natal chart, what is the optimal energy flow for you to go through life and manifest and do the things you want to do that makes the most sense. And when you start to look at it through that perspective, it takes on a little bit of a lot of a different meaning in turn. Vibrational astrology doesn't use a lot of the traditional terminology that's used in classical astrology, such as ruling planets or planetary rulers. What planet rules particular houses? We're not saying that that doesn't work, but the data has shown at this point, haven't been able to validate that. So we only use concepts that have been around, that have been validated by the data and the research methods. And that's the whole premise of vibrational astrology, where we're looking at everything's energy at the end of the day. And we're hearing more and more people say that. Some people don't know what they're saying when they say it, but regardless, it all comes down to energy at a subatomic level. And vibrational astrology gives us a little glimpse into how that energy is designed to flow through us as individuals, so that then we can take advantage of the various cycles and opportunities that come about based on the moving planets in the sky.
So if I was to come to have a reading with you, how would I use what you tell me on an ongoing basis? How would that actually benefit me in terms of, like, because obviously I come from a sort of internal energy, this sort of cosmic energy, and this chakra system, which is, slightly more earthbound almost than certainly astrology. And so I can relate how to use that in my life or in somebody else's life. But how do I use your astrology reading? And I go out into the world and I go, okay, so I've got this reading, and I don't know what Pluto's doing today because I don't have the app or whatever, but I want to know.
It's in Aquarius, and it'll be there for about 20 years, but it just got in actually in January. But go ahead. I'm sorry. See, I'm an astrology nerd. I love answering. I don't know well, I know what's going on because I look at it every day.
I mean, this is the thing, is that, like, I mean, on a high level, I hear about this. I hear about, Pluto moving into Aquarius or whatever
Right.
in January. And it's like, oh my God, this is like massive. This is going to be a huge shift. And I'm like, yes, that's the kind of astrology that I can relate to,
Right.
where it impacts the energy of the kind of the masses, of the
collective. Yeah.
So, but how do you suggest people use it in an individual way, in a, that very personal way?
So it often, I'll go back to your original question, and that is, how do I use the information in a reading? And one of the things I always ask people when they fill out the intake form is, what are we focusing on? Because When you look at someone's astrological chart, I could probably interpret that for 12 hours straight and still not even scratch the surface. So it's a matter of narrowing the focus of what do you want to know about? Are we
Mm.
focusing on relationships, which I don't do relationships. It's just not my bag. I'm a business owner, and there are many, many other astrologers who excel in that department. I just don't like doing relationships. However, career, that's a biggie. Moving, relocation, how to navigate certain seasons of life that come. So let's just take career for an example, because I
Yeah.
think everyone of your listeners can relate to that.
Mm.
Someone's in a career situation, they're not happy. They're trying to figure out, what am I meant to do in this life? Now, I am not the type of astrologer who you come to and says, well, you should consider being a plumber or a funeral undertaker, or that's not what I do. We
Yeah.
deal with the underlying energy process. So the
Mm.
first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run calculations to find out in your natal chart, which, remember, that does not change. That's your cosmic energy to work with throughout this lifetime. I want to find out where the strongest vibrations or aspects are present in your natal chart, and then the vibrational charts beyond that. We have ways of being able to calculate that. So I'll keep this example very, very simple. So let's say I run the calculations and we discover that your strongest vibration is, well, we'll pick the 13th vibration, for example, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. And the reason that may be strong is, let's say maybe you've got the planets Neptune, Mars, and Saturn all aspecting, forming a conjunction, or any other type of aspect. They're all activated, forming this circuit in the 13th vibration. So here's how I break that down for the client. First, we have to look at the meaning of the vibration. The 13th vibration, if someone has a lot of activity there, meaning there's a lot of planetary placements aspecting in the 13th vibration, that's all about rising above mediocrity. People with a strong 13th vibration tend to be the ones who are never satisfied with the status quo. They want to go and hit high levels. Average doesn't work for them. Mundane tasks doesn't work for them. They feel like they almost have a mission or a calling to do something in life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is that something? Well, in order to figure out what that is, then we look at the planets that are involved inside of that 13th vibration. Because again, different vibrations bring in different energy patterns. And the 13th is one of the well-documented and well-researched vibrations that when people have a 13th vibe, they've got a mission to fulfill. Using those planets that I gave you an example of before, which were Neptune, Saturn, and I forget what else. Let's say Neptune, Saturn, and
Mars
Pluto.
used.
I forget what, because it does. It could be. Here's the difference: when you put different planets in or take different planets out, it changes the quality of the energy.
Mm.
So Neptune is what is, and in VA, each planet regulates just one process. It's not like in traditional astrology. Well, you look at Venus, and Venus is love, and it could mean attraction to money, and it could mean this, and it could. In vibrational astrology, Venus regulates one thing. It regulates our attraction to beauty. Now, that can play out in a whole bunch of different ways, but the underlying energy is how we're attracted to beauty. Neptune, going back to our example, regulates what is magical for us as an individual. Now, what does that mean? When I'm talking magical, it's what's the ideal situation. For some people, we just had the Super Bowl here in the United States. For some people, their dream in life is to go to the Super Bowl. That's it. That's heaven on earth for them. All right, that's cool. No judgment there. Other people's magic comes from them being able to get up in front of a group of people and speak and inspire others. Other people's magic is sitting in the woods in a shack, communing with nature. It doesn't matter the specific content, it's the context that we're paying attention to. So 13th vibration, magical, we'll use Neptune, which is what is magical to us. Saturn is the planet that takes away things that are not essential, and it helps us get pure. Saturn is often got a bad rep in astrology, saying, well, it's the big bad malefic and it creates problems. And Not in vibrational astrology. It just serves an energy function. And the function is it removes all the clutter and debris so that you can see what you're really dealing with and getting down to a pure sense of whatever's going on. So now we combine the energy of those two planets. Neptune is what's magical to you. Saturn is, I want the real magic, not the daily horoscopes in the paper. I want real astrology. Or if I'm going to get a piece of art, I don't want a fake knockoff type of, this might offend some people, Thomas Kincaid type of artwork that's mass produced in a warehouse. I want artwork that's done by an artist where it's a one-off and it's pure, because Saturn pulls out all of the things that are non-essential. And then we have, let's say, Pluto. Pluto brings in compulsion to the mix and intensity and really, really hyper-focused drive and awareness and momentum. If we add that to the mix, then you can become almost ascetic in your approach to life, because when Saturn and Pluto are involved, it's going to cut things to the bone and get everything out of the way that's not necessary. So if someone's desire or magic in the 13th vibration is communing with nature, they're more than happy to live in the woods in a shack with not a whole lot of adornments, because they don't need all that stuff. They want to strip it down to the bone, get rid of the distractions, and then enable them to live their life in a way that works for them so that they can create or write or whatever the case might be. So that's one example of thousands that can end up unfolding. My goal is to help clients know where is that core energy in their life and what is going to most resonate with them, so that moving forward, they can then make decisions, whether it's career-based or timing-based or a whole bunch of other factors that are going to resonate with that energy, as opposed to being dissonant or conflicting with that energy. That was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope I made some sense in there.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I think you did. And I find it's really interesting. And I think that this whole way of how we use it in our lives, it's a very personal thing. I mean, in the same way that interpreting the chakra energies is a very personal thing. I've got a library full of, I've got a bookshelf full of books, and they all have slightly different, because people come at it from a slightly different way.
Sure.
But there's value in all of it. So this is what I'm kind of thinking about with all of these different types of astrology that there are. And I love the idea of this vibrational astrology. And because I know when I read in your, when I was reading up about you, doing my research about you, you said that this was something because it was kind of based in maths and geometry.
Oh, very much so.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because I feel I'm recently got really into numerology, and I think numerology is a fascinating way of looking at personality and people, and also one's energy. But again, based in maths and geometry, we just have to look. Maths and geometry is everywhere in this world and always has been.
So now you've opened the can of worms, because here we can talk for hours. So when we're talking about sacred geometry, which is what you're referring to, and then math, which is the foundation of the universe. And sorry, kids, the high school teacher was right. You can't escape math. It's going to come back to get you, regardless of when that happens in your life.
Yeah.
But the idea is that there are certain recurring patterns in nature. We have 5 fingers on this hand, 5 fingers on this hand. Together it forms 10. We don't have 3. We don't have 7. That's a pattern that repeats. Certain flowers have particular patterns in the number of leaves and branches and what have you. So when we start to make observations of anything, you're going to notice certain fractal patterns repeating themselves over and over again. And this is even taken down to the subatomic level.
Yeah.
Vibrational astrology actually works within the confines of physics and quantum mechanics. Now, I'm not a physicist. I don't profess to be. I know enough to be dangerous. But here's an example. They discovered recently, I mean, within the past year and a half, where they took an atom and they split it in half. And they have this one atom here, the one part, and then the other part they put in another room down the hall or maybe even in another building. And what was interesting is when they did something to atom number one, now that they had split it in half, you got two of them, the other atom that was far, far away in another location ended up reacting, even though it wasn't in the same physical space and dimension. And that has to do, I don't want to get too technical here with a thing called spin and angular momentum, but it has to do with how the movement of these atoms occur at a subatomic particle in different vibrations or pattern. Think of it as like a beat in music. You know, a waltz is 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, versus a march, which is bump, 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 bump. So these patterns are repeating at a visual level, at a subatomic level. And when we put these various elements together and you start looking at how they interact in a chart, that's when the geometry comes into play. Because in astrology, things have to be within a certain proximity to each other in order for them to have an influence or a presence that's known. So two planets that are sitting very close together, we call them a conjunction. And, you know, in the sky, they'd be, you know, great distances apart, but the theory is that the energetic fields blend. When those planets are in a certain resonance together, that changes the tone of the energy. And then when that resonance starts to dissipate because the planets move, then that energy starts to decrease. So you can begin to see how the math and the geometry and the resonance and the idea of music theory, which is also based in math, a lot of common threads pulling all those things together into vibrational astrology.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind when you described that was that, hang on, if they're split an atom, isn't that an atom bomb? Isn't why do they not explode? But yeah, I mean, I suppose that's like it's verging on the quantum physics side of things, you know, and slit theory, and like nothing is, it's that sort of perceptual thing of two potentialities being true or untrue at the same time. I don't know. I'm tying myself in knots because I don't truly know.
Yeah, but that's okay. Let's bring it back though to a very important question that you asked is, well, how do you use this stuff? What I always encourage people to do is, you know, if they're familiar with their own chart or they're seeing an astrologer, you want to focus on longer cycles or longer transit patterns, because short patterns, they may impact you day to day, but they're not going to change your life. For example, the moon runs around the chart very, very quickly. It just travels at a faster orbit and speed. So, you know, the moon is going to affect our moods. The moon regulates our emotions. So some days we might be a little more excited. Other days maybe a little down and depressed. But yeah, okay, all over the place. Nothing that's going to be earth-shattering. However, when we start to look at longer or slower moving transits, such as Saturn, and how that impacts different parts of our chart, that's moving a lot more slowly. So that's when we start to see these longer cycles come into play so that we can then take advantage of them. And let me give you a real practical example. I remember a couple of years ago, I was doing something where I was going to make an announcement on social media, something related to astrology. And I was looking at where Mercury and Mars were in the sky in relation to those in my chart. Because remember, when a planet in the sky aspects any planet in your chart, but even the same planet, then you're going to have a surge of that energy. Well, both Mercury and Mars at that time, when I wanted to initially make the announcement, they were moving what we refer to as retrograde, which is the appearance of them moving backwards in the sky. And retrogrades are nothing to fear. Everyone says, oh, Mercury retrograde, the world's going to. No, it just means that it's a time for reflection and evaluate what's going on. Don't make any major moves during that time. So Mercury and Mars were retrograde right in this period when I wanted to make the announcement. I could have made the announcement at that point. The world wouldn't have come to an end. However, knowing how energy works, I waited a good 2 weeks until both of those planets started moving in what we refer to as direct forward motion, so that that energy is flowing out and not flowing inward. So it's a matter of taking advantage of the cosmic timings so that you could be aware of when to make these more important decisions so that you're not in a situation where you're dealing with energy that's either going to be misinterpreted by others or it's going to bounce back to you and it's not going to make it out into the world.
Yeah.
So the longer, slower moving transits, these are the things that end up creating cycles that could last anywhere from several months to 20 years. Pluto is the slowest moving planet. And now we know that Pluto, as you mentioned, left the sign or the constellation of Capricorn and is now in Aquarius. Collectively, we're going to see some major shifts over the next 20 years, but that's a very slow unfolding versus, let's say, the sun or moon or the personal planets that go all the way up to Mars. Those are the things that are going to have more shorter run cycles, a little bit more intensity, because they're going to start, do their thing, and then stop, versus slower moving planets. They're just going at a more slow and deliberate pace, and those take longer to play out.
But I have to say, I'm quite interested in these more global aspects. Like, as you said, Pluto moving to Aquarius recently, this was a big deal. This has signified a lot of shifts. And I saw a lot of things about it. I saw a lot of articles and people talking about it. And it seemed to me, it interested me. And I think that this is the aspect of astrology that this collective stuff is the thing that I find quite interesting. So, when a new year starts, here we are, fairly, well, by the time this goes out, it won't quite be a newish year, but it's a newish year.
New-ish, yes.
Yeah. Um, do you make predictions for the year? Can you say, right, this year, the general energy of the world is going to be chaos or harmony or personal power? Because these are I've heard that this year being a number 8 numerology year, being a Chinese dragon year, it's kind of an independent personal power time to set out your own stall and do your own thing kind of energy, like, so personal energy, personal power energy. Is that something that is born out in the stars with the astrology, with the vibrational astrology as well, or is that too general for you?
It can be. So here's the challenge. So what you're referring to is a branch of astrology called mundane astrology, and it doesn't mean that it's boring, but mundane astrology is looking at global events, national trends.
Yeah.
The political scene here in the United States, I'm sure you're aware, is very tumultuous right now. A lot of stuff going on.
Yep.
It's not an area of expertise that I specialize in, and I'll tell you why. It's not because it can't be helpful. It's harder from a vibrational astrology perspective to study mundane events.
Right.
Because there's only so much data you can get. If you're going to go and look at what planets were aspecting during the first World War, there's only so much data you can get, which is different than, let's say, people who you put into a extreme case sampling formula where you're looking at, let's say, the best athletes in the world, and we're wanting to see what commonalities exist in their charts and in their placements. Now, having said all of that, yeah, you can have a general idea of what the collective will experience. And the reason why Pluto is focused on the collective is because it's a generational planet. It takes Pluto 248 years to work its way around the whole zodiac. We've never seen it in Aquarius before. This is the first time in our lifetime and the only time. It's never going to be back in Capricorn again. So big swaths of people are going to get impacted by these slower moving planets. And yeah, it could be helpful to get a tone of what to expect. Personally, I've gone on record and said that I think what we're going to see technology wise over the next 3 to 5 years before we even barely get into this Pluto cycle is just going to blow us away. I mean, we're seeing it now with AI. Just yesterday, OpenAI released a thing where you type in, give me a video of a polar bear riding an ice cream truck down the street in the Alps. And you wait for 2 minutes and it comes up with this video of a polar bear riding an ice cream truck in the Alps. That's crazy. I mean, I just go back 10 years from now. And if you told me that I would say, yeah, you're out of your mind. That's impossible. So
Yeah.
because Aquarius is about the network and expansion and democratization, and everyone has a part. Yeah, there's something to that, but it has its limitations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is, I mean, I could talk to you all day about this. I do find it interesting. And I don't, I feel like if you are somebody who is interested in astrology, then you kind of know your stuff and all of this will make sense. I feel woefully inequipped, really, to interview you about all of this stuff.
No, you're
Yeah.
fine. Because here's the thing, and someone paid me I'm not tooting my own horn with this, but you're keying into the message that I put out. I had a comment on a social media platform this morning. Someone said, I visit a lot of profiles here. This is the only one that makes sense so that I can understand this information. I will be the first to tell you, astrology is a complex subject.
Mm.
It has taken me almost 30 years to get to the point where I would, if you would have come to me 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't be doing these type of interviews. I didn't have enough mastery of it. It
Mm.
is a lifelong commitment.
It
And
is.
this is going to upset probably some younger folks, but don't go to a young astrologer. They haven't worked with it long enough. I see people on social media who just regurgitate things that they've learned from this one or that one, and they're pulling all the stuff that's together and disjointed information. You need to have someone, whoever you work with, and I'm not saying the world used to work with me, find someone who resonates with you, who's been at it for a long time, because there are so many nooks and crannies and different little things, but you're doing the right thing. You're asking the questions. And my goal is to transcribe this potentially complex language into digestible, easy pieces. And you're asking the right stuff.
Yeah, thank you. But it is incredibly complex. And when I look at this natal chart that I had done, and it's not a vibrational astrology one, so
Yeah,
probably
but still, a natal chart,
but
there's a
still,
lot of power in the natal chart.
it's pages of just like tables of
Yep.
numbers, symbols, and this and that, and the other and the other.
Yep.
And it's like,
So,
how am I
so,
supposed
so
to make
let's talk about that for a second. What you had done, and I offer these, but they have their place. I think you had an automated report that interpreted your natal placements
Hmm.
and gave you a narrative, which basically transcribed what does it mean if this dot is here and this planet's there, and it put it in verbiage, and then it probably gave you some planetary speeds and what have you.
Yeah.
There's some benefit to that. I use those reports with people who just want to kind of get their feet wet to get a little flavoring of, what is astrology, what's the general gist, to pick up on some major themes in someone's life.
Hmm.
I discourage folks from using those type of reports to make major life decisions, because you really do need to have the conversation with a professional astrologer to show you what's important and what isn't. There's a
Yeah.
lot of information in that report that's probably very helpful. And then there's other things that you don't know what to do with because you're not an astrologer, and it potentially can overwhelm you. It's like, oh, I don't know about all this. And then you
But
just kind of
also
throw.
the other thing that I find frustrating, and this is what I find, with this, those kind of, the daily horoscopes and so on, is that, it's telling me what I'm like. So it's saying because I've got opposition between the moon and Mars, that means I'm irascible and easily angered. Now, right now, I might sound that way, but I'm really not. So there's a lot of stuff that I read in there. I'm just like, that doesn't sound like me. I don't I doesn't, some of it I do see, but a lot of it, I was like, it feels like anyone could read it. So this is why I'm interested to talk to somebody who is an astrologer, because the one time I went to a proper astrologer when I was just out of university, I was
Mhm.
young and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I came away and I had pages and pages, and it was very good reading. But the one thing that sticks out, as I remember it now, is that he said I would make a very good teacher. And I was like, to hell with that. I don't want to stand in front of a room of kids. That's what I thought when I
Yeah.
interpreted teacher. Now, of course, I've been a yoga teacher for 20 years, and now I teach the chakras, and I am a teacher. So it
So
was
so
really,
let so let me jump in, because this is perfect example. Like I said before, I never say you should be this or that or whatnot. I'd have to look at your chart to obviously see what's going on, but let's assume I saw a similar thing. What I would probably pick up on is there's a desire inside of you to want to show others the way.
mm,
How is that going to show up? I have no idea. I mean, we can look at certain things that might give us some clues, But is this a fair statement to say that whatever it is that you're interested in, whether it's yoga or how to harness the power of the chakras, etc., that it excites you, it engages you to bring that information to other people? Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's a lot different. Notice the difference there than you should be a teacher or you should be an author. It's we're looking at the underlying energy flow, and people get that. You smiled
Mm.
as soon as I said that because yesterday I was doing a consult with someone and they were saying, I had my chart done and they said that I should have been in technology because I had a lot of Aquarius placements. I said, well, that's not how we would interpret that in vibrational astrology. So you're beginning to see how VA can be much more nuanced and
Yeah, much more
specialized.
subtle. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think it's a fascinating thing. And then I've got one really annoying question to ask you, okay?
Go
And I'm
for it.
sure you get this all the time, but this is like my primo most annoying question. Okay, so you ready? So twins.
Ah, yes, yes.
You've had this one a million times before. All in the same place, pretty much same time, different personalities, different lives.
Right.
How do we get around?
So it's interesting. There hasn't been much first of all, there hasn't been much astrological research done, period, because astrologers have notoriously been horrible at conducting research.
Mm,
That's changing. And academia doesn't know astrology. They'll try to do some correlation with the sun sign, which won't pair out, by the way. There was a study done by David Cochran and his people, looked at 21,000 married couples to try to determine if there was any predictability of which signs, which sun sign, your birth,
mm.
the Aries, Taurus, Capricorn, whatever you're born under with your sun, if there was any predictability amongst the sun signs forming relationships, and the data came back with a big fat zero.
Really?
Okay, which I know that's gonna, well, it worked for me. Yeah, it might work for you, but statistically, it's not significant.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's certain criteria. So when you're looking at twins, we don't have a whole lot of data to begin with. The thing that you've got to keep in mind is, yeah, they're born pretty much at the same time, within a couple of minutes apart, same view of the sky,
Mm,
and yet they can have radically different views of the world and the way that they navigate the world. What I think, and this is just me right now, because that's a very excellent question. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you because there isn't enough data there. A lot of what shapes people, and this goes back into my expertise as a personality profiler. You can have two people who are reared in a similar environment, but they're just going to see the world through different lenses and different perspectives. Now, from an astrology standpoint, how much does that come into it? I don't know. And I'll tell you that, that's the thing about the VA astrologers. We're a very interesting bunch from the standpoint
mm,
of, we like the whole idea of the metaphysics and what have you, but we like the science just as much. And we're not afraid to say, we don't know.
mm.
And I always caution folks, be wary if someone says that they have a definitive answer for everything about everything, because more often than not, it's not quite there. So I wish I had a better answer for you. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with the whole nature nurture situation. And even though
Yeah.
two individuals can be reared in the same house, maybe one of the twins gets a little bit of additional favoring from a parent, or has an easier time for whatever reason interacting with folks. I have twins in my family, believe it or not. And I told my relative, I said, with the moment that they're born, you better get the date and birth and time and all that, you know, but that's just an N of one. You can't do any research on
Yeah.
that other than some anecdotal stuff. But
Yeah.
maybe someday in the future, we'll have some better data on that. But that's a question that goes through my mind quite frequently.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is a truly fascinating subject, and I feel like I know more than I did when I started talking to you. So thank you so much, Michael. Tell people how they can get in touch with you, how they can
Sure.
find you.
Absolutely. So the I live in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. So the easy way to get to my website is blueridgeastrology.com. That's blueridgeastrology.com. I'm also on all the major socials. I do daily updates for the collective at whole on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Same moniker, Blue Ridge Astrology. I'll come right up. On the website, you can see about the types of consultations I offer. I'm actually teaching right now a basic astrology class, not for people who want to be professional astrologers, but want to have some basic understanding. So you can jump on the mailing list there. And if you got questions, hit me up on any one of the platforms. I'll do my best to answer them. Again, blueridgeastrology.com.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I feel like it's another one of those things, subjects where the more you know, the more you realize there is to know. And all of
That
us,
is that
yeah,
is so accurate. That is so accurate. It is a true marathon, not a sprint.
yeah.
When you're studying astrology, can I just share one last piece of advice with anyone out there who's interested in astrology? And this is for people who just want to have a basic understanding. And even if eventually they want to go down the path of becoming a professional astrologer. One of the earliest mistakes that I made, and I didn't realize this until I was about 6 years in, is that there, as I mentioned earlier, there was over 30 different types of systems of astrology.
Mm.
You've got to find a system that resonates with you. I'm not saying VA is the only thing out there. Not at all. I mean, people may like medieval astrology or Hellenistic, or it resonates with them. Whatever it is, whatever you decide to study, you got to stay in that lane for a while and not jump around and say, well, today I'm going to study sidereal astrology, which looks at, more of the stars and how they influence things. And now I'm going to look at Vedic, which is very popular in India. You can't mix and match concepts and have consistency. And that jammed me up for the longest time, because there are similar concepts that may overlap, but when you're in that foundation period, you've got to learn a system and become familiar with it. And then maybe eventually, if you want to branch out and learn another system, you can't learn them all. If someone wants a Vedic astrology reading, I'm not your guy. I don't know Vedic. I know vibrational. So pick a lane, dive deep, and then that's how you start to understand this stuff over the long haul.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like very good advice. Thank you. So listen, Michael, thank you so much for joining
Thank
me.
you.
It's been fascinating. Thank you.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed chatting with you. I always welcome the opportunity to bring real astrology to the world, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.